And tonight on this studio audience edition of Hannity, we have assembled our best bipartisan panel to date. And over the course of the next hour, this rowdy group, they're going to be under one roof to tackle the most controversial issues facing the country, from the government shutdown to Obamacare and, of course, the upcoming debt limit. No topic is off limits. And now the debate begins.
He knows what my phone number is. All he has to do is call.
Game on.
They're forcing the American people to buy a product that they do not want and cannot afford.
The Speaker answers the call of conservatives.
It's irresponsible of the president and his men to even talk about default.
The man leading the charge against this administration's take-it-or-leave-it approach is just minutes away.
There's no reason for us to default.
Anybody signed up for Obamacare yet?
Even Hollywood is now losing hope. Tonight, we'll take you to the front lines of Obamacare and speak to real doctors about the life-changing impacts of this law. An all-new Hannity starts right here, right now.
Now, in less than 2 hours, we will reach the one-week anniversary of the Obama-Reid shutdown, and 6 days into the stalemate, there appears to be no end in sight. Now, earlier today, President Barack Obama had this message for House Republicans. Let's take a look.
We're not going to negotiate under the threat of further harm to our economy and middle-class families. We're not going to negotiate under the threat of a prolonged shutdown until Republicans get 100% of what they want. If Republicans and Speaker Boehner are saying there are not enough votes, then they should prove it. Let the bill go to the floor and let's see what happens. Just vote. Let every member of Congress vote their conscience, and they can determine whether or not they want to shut the government down.
Now, however, just yesterday, the Speaker of the House slammed the door on Obama's no negotiating strategy. Here's what he said.
There's no way we're going to pass when the votes are not in the House to pass a clean debt limit. And the president is risking default by not having a conversation with us.
So under no circumstances will you pass a clean debt limit?
We are not going down that path. It is time to deal with America's problems.
Now, as the showdown continues tonight, we thought we would remind you, our viewers, how the administration is now using this shutdown to demonize Republicans. So over the course of the next 60 minutes, we're going to be scrolling right at the bottom of your screen the many sites and the many services that the president himself has chosen to take offline. Now, the list was compiled with the help of our friends over at Breitbart.com. And with that, let me welcome in this wonderful studio audience. How's everybody tonight? Awesome. Good to see you. All right. We are 10 days, Michelle Fields, away from a debt ceiling that our Secretary of the Treasury says is going to be a catastrophe. The president will not negotiate with Republicans. What's going to happen?
Look, Democrats want this shutdown. They are trying to make this as painful as possible for the American people. Republicans passed bills. They sent it to the Senate, and the Senate is the one that's blocking it. They're not willing to compromise. Republicans are willing to compromise, and it's a failure of leadership on the president's part. You
know, Penny, you're a Democrat. Defund, delay, get rid of all special exemptions. Let's have a conference and talk. They won't.
We've had this debate, John.
We talk. You're a Democrat. You're a big lib.
We have had this conversation. We've been having it since 2009. It has been debated, and it became the law in 2011. We had an election about it. We won. Democrats won.
Did Republicans win in the House?
No, they actually lost seats.
Did the Republicans win in the House?
They actually lost seats in the House in the 2012.
Who has the majority in the House, Republicans or Democrats?
And Democrats actually increased in the Senate. And we had a Supreme Court decide this is the law of the land. So, Sean, that was never, ever going to be a point of negotiation.
Ari Fleischer, I read the Constitution, and we have separation of powers, and I thought we had checks and balances in our system. I thought the House had the power of the purse. Am I wrong?
Well, they do, per the Constitution, per practical way laws are governed, but also it's the job of the president to lead. And it's the job of the president, all presidents, to negotiate. No one party or no one part of the legislature or the executive gets to say, my way or the highway, you must listen to me. Leaders figure out ways to bring people together, and the president saying, I will not negotiate, it's the absence of leadership.
Ebony?
But a negotiation is about you get something, I get something. And so far, the president has said most of what is in, this current package, the Republicans approve of in terms of numbers. So I think the Republican Party is getting something. So negotiations are taking place. They're just not happening in the way that the Speaker wants.
Negotiations are not happening. The president said he will not negotiate either over the debt ceiling And we're 10 days away. He's warning about a default. Connie Mack, you've been in the House of Representatives. In all your years there, did you ever see an example like this?
Sean, I got to tell you, this is how the president operates. I mean, so many times the Republican conference was looking for someone to talk with and negotiate with, and the president was missing. The reason that you have people standing up like Ted Cruz is there is a vacuum. There is no leadership happening from the president or the leadership in the Senate, and Senator Cruz stepped in to fill that place. And I only wish other Republicans, senators from his own state, would step in and help him, because it is a lack of leadership.
You know, Leslie, even Bob Woodward, I think we'll all agree Bob Woodward is not part of my vast right-wing conspiracy with my conservative friends. Even he said this is on the president's head because he has, as Ari said, an obligation to lead. Doesn't he have an obligation to at least talk to them? He talks to the Russians. He's going to talk to the new president of Iran, but he can't talk to Speaker Boehner?
Well, it's funny because when you talk about the people on your side of the aisle and drinking that Kool-Aid, I have quote after quote after quote of Republicans, even some that work here, that talk about how this is a suicide caucus. The president doesn't need to negotiate. The Republicans are delusional, Sean, if they think the president is going to negotiate to defund, negotiate to repeal, to replace legislation.
So the president of the United States,
in his possession,
we're 10 days away from a default. His own Secretary of the Treasury says it will be a catastrophe.
Absolutely, and not just for America, but for the world.
And he won't even talk. He won't even discuss.
He doesn't need to talk. Democrats have tried to talk to Republicans 7 times. 195 Democrats and 21 Republicans now say put it to a vote, a clean vote. And we're not getting it from Boehner.
435 members of the U.S. House. That is the branch that is closest to the American people, which tells you the reason why this is happening right now, the majority of the American people do not want this bill. They're willing to do whatever they can. Yes, they do not want this bill.
We're going to get into that separately. I think the question, Nina, you're more objective.
I'm in Washington.
You're in Washington?
I talk to people there.
Is that a blessing or a curse? I'm not really sure.
But let me point out an irony here. Let's say the president did negotiate. Let's say he made some movement on reforming entitlements, some of which he's agreed to in the past on Medicare and Social Security. Let's say Speaker Boehner got a deal out of this White House. Those Republicans who started this over Obamacare won't go along with that. They started down this path, which was an unwinnable fight. They knew they couldn't win. They knew they didn't have the Senate. They knew they didn't have the White House. They knew this was an unwinnable fight. They want to defund Obamacare, and they're waiting for Obama to blink, and it's not going to happen.
But they've come down 3 steps. Their last offer was exemptions, special exemptions for big business and the subsidy exemption for members of Congress. Is that so unfair?
I would say the better strategy on the part of the defund Obamacare crowd would be to, for example,
am I part of that crowd?
To ally themselves with unions. Labor unions have problems with Obamacare, but their strategy is based on taking down Republicans who disagree with their tactics and primarying them from the right.
If the president gets away with this no negotiating strategy, both on the debt limit and Obamacare, then any leverage that Republicans have, and they are in control of the House, is gone. Why would they do that?
Well, of course. Also, the president said, I won't negotiate while they're holding something over my head. But that's the only way there's negotiations. He holds something over the Republicans' head, and the Republicans hold something over his head. I just want to add one other thing that a lot of Americans don't know. I do believe that the president thinks so politically that hurting Americans is okay for his strategy. And I want to give one example, and I'd love the liberals on this panel to respond to. Why, since sequester, has the president not allowed tours of the White House? It costs virtually nothing. And there's a reason. He's petulant, he's immature, and he wants to hurt the American people.
We're going to get into those examples.
I would love liberals to respond to that particular thing the president
did. Because he wants to inflict harm.
Yes, exactly.
You're a liberal.
Hurting the American people, when you say hurting the American people, I don't think of one party, and that's you look at the Paul Ryan budget, which hurts women, children, infants. We can go on and on and on about how they'll do everything possible to make sure that you don't fund middle-class families, working families, you don't put the American people back to work. That is hurting the American people.
Want to know what's hurting? Wait, you want to know what's hurting American families? $17 trillion in debt. You know what's hurting American families? $90 trillion in unfunded liabilities. You know what's hurting American families?
Sean, wait a minute.
You care about young kids? Stop stealing their future and placing the burden of debt on their shoulders.
I hear
They'll
that.
pay that.
I hear that.
You hear that? It's real numbers.
When mothers are talking about how they're going to feed their kids today, we're not talking. That's a completely different
And
conversation.
you're willing
from
to
the
bankrupt the country because you think it's a good cause.
If we're talking about kids, why aren't we talking about not taking away food stamps from those that are less privileged? If we're talking
Wait a
about
minute.
kids,
The
why are we
the
not
House
giving them
Republicans
student
passed the
loans
WIC program. Why doesn't the Senate
to get
pass
an
it?
education? And by the way, Dennis, this is why I think we shouldn't have tours of the White House right now, because we just had a crazy woman try and perhaps kill the president in Washington. Every other week, there's some kind of a massacre if somebody's nuts and gets a gun in their hand.
To know that one day some woman would try to drive into the Capitol, I don't buy that. The president wants Americans to hurt so that he can win politically.
This is a wild goose chase that we've just been led down. No offense. But the president is really they're trying to do as much damage as they can to get people to feel the pain, to try to get the public on their side. Here's the problem. The president goes on national television and says our veterans, our children, all of these things. The House goes through, passes bills to address those issues, and the Senate won't take them up. You know, my friends on the left keep talking about a clean vote in the House. Just the president's demanding now that we have a clean vote in the House. Why don't they have a clean vote in the Senate on defunding Obamacare with only 51 votes instead of the 60 that they put in place right now?
Stay right there. I promise, Mia. We'll get back to you and everybody else. We'll have more with this lively studio audience throughout the hour. Up next, Kentucky Senator Rand Paul joins me from our nation's capital. He'll explain what it means for all of you and each and every day that the president, Harry Reid, refused to negotiate with Republicans. Then we're going to turn things back over to the audience. This is a special edition of Hannity you can't afford to miss.